Hey, good to see you, Neil.
Good to see you, Tom.
And Tom Worthington there from ANU. Who else have we got today? We've got someone from Nelson. Is that Paul?
Yeah. Hi. Can you hear me, Tom?
Yeah.
Oh,
we
okay.
can't see you, but that's probably okay.
Yeah. I'm sure that will be okay. I've got to figure out how to flip my camera.
There we go. I'm just finding Lisa's mouse. There you go. Hey, well, welcome everyone to our weekly webinar. Sorry about the messy start, but you get that occasionally. So whereabouts are you, Neil? Are you back in Japan?
I am indeed, yes. I'm in Kobe. I'm in my house, and it's 6:30 in the morning.
So you had your breakfast, or?
Yes. Bowl of cereal.
Oh, thanks for joining us so early. Actually, I was hoping you'd join us, and thought maybe, seeing as you are one of the people who've been, working on your portfolio, you might want to tell us where you're at.
Well, I did the lesson or unit 4, which is about legislation and policy, and this was very interesting for me because it's not something I've thought about at all, particularly. And I was wondering why that is, because I'm sure there are policies and legislation in Japan, but they don't seem to be foregrounded in my working life. So I had to kind of think, what are the policies or legislation that might have affected me? It was quite difficult to do that, and I'd never checked the Ministry of Education's website before to see what sort of strategies they have. So it was a little bit of a new world, and I'm wondering whether people in other countries, it's something that you talk about in your not daily life necessarily, but it comes up in meetings that you have to discuss legislation or policies, because it certainly doesn't happen in the context where I work. So it was a new thing to do. So I appreciate people's response to that.
Yeah, I like the way that you did it with a couple of videos. I thought that was really nice. Just makes it a lot more engaging to look at and respond. Hopefully people will give you some feedback. So Tom's just typing away in the chat there that they have regulations about international students. Do you want to say something about that, Tom? A little bit of a problem with your audio there, Tom. Kind of only just coming through barely, Tom. We seem to be having audio problems all over the place this morning. Okay, that's all right. Yeah, so I think that this is quite dependent on your context, and as you say, Neil, perhaps in Japan, maybe there aren't significant issues there, but in the UK, I think, and Europe, there's huge issues around data protection, GDPR. That's a big one there. I think the government's quite active in legislation around higher education there as well. And certainly New Zealand, we have several key issues, one around the Treaty of Waitangi, so biculturalism, which is very, very much part of our country's context. But there could be other more generic sort of issues that you could, engage with, think about, like accessibility. How does your development of a course or the way you interact with your students, how do you deal with accessibility issues? Do you have blind students? Do you have hard of hearing students? and what do you do about that? So there's bound to be some form of either legislation or institutional policies around those. So I guess it's just kind of exploring what are the things that are relevant for you and what impacts on your practice and on your students. So I think that's the key. So what about for you, Paul? What would be some issues perhaps for you in Nelson?
Sorry, Tom, I've just been trying to work out how to get my camera to work.
That's
right. I guess some of the things I'm thinking about are some of the use of technology, like we have a shared blog set up for our arts students, and how that's being used by some of the students is sometimes a bit scary. We've had a case in the last year of students using Moodle forums, or a particular student using Moodle forums in kind of an offensive way.
Right. So has the institution developed policies around the use of the forums to?
I think it's probably covered by our existing policies, but whenever something happens like that, it's always you're thinking, oh gosh, has another student been hurt by this, and how this, are our policies adequate? And I think usually they prove to be, there's something that covers it.
Yeah, I think a lot of that comes down to issues of digital literacy and fair use, etc., and appropriate use of various tools. So particularly, say, social media, and I think that's been highlighted this week, particularly in the New Zealand context with Christchurch and the difficulty it was to get rid of the offensive material being shown on various social media sites. So do we need governmental legislation around that? How do you legislate with these big companies that have bigger incomes than most countries do?
Yes. In fact, during the week, I'm doing a master's course at the moment, and we have a shared student group, and they were using Messenger. We'd initially used Messenger as a way of communicating as students, and one of the students actually shared that link on
that forum. Okay.
Yeah. I'm totally just to say, oh, look what's happening. This is happening, guys. It wasn't kind of no malicious intent behind it, but I've actually shared that offensive link with the live stream video on it. So, yeah.
Yeah.
And it kind of puts you in a vulnerable space, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's like, what do I do with it? Do I just ignore it, or do I share it, or what do I do? But yeah, that's kind of a hard one.
Yes, I ignored it because it was on Messenger. It wasn't an official NMIT channel. It was just an informal kind of a chat that had been set up. So
yeah, so it's not sticky. It doesn't.
And I'm guessing that link was shared like literally thousands of times. But I know a Christchurch person has been in court for sharing the same link.
Yeah, and potential 14 years jail actually.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So it's been taken pretty seriously. So I think that, case in point of how do we prepare our students for the appropriate use of online tools, whether they be social media, whether they be the institutional, LMS, VLE, what's the appropriate use of these sorts of tools, because they have global impact. So yeah.
It's Tom here. I'm just wondering if my microphone's working.
Yes, it is working, Tom. Excellent.
Finally. I'd suggest we need to teach our students how to communicate online, just as we teach them how to write readable, scholarly papers.
That's right. We can't assume that they know how to. Just because they're using social media doesn't mean they know how to use it appropriately.
Yeah, so I'm teaching some of our Masters of Computing students to write a job application later in the semester. And as part of that, we make them answer some questions in Moodle and then respond to each other's questions. And we have to get them out of the sort of slang, abbreviated style of communicating and say to them, you know, we want you to write short things, but they have to be proper sentences and referenced and all the usual stuff. And of course, they also have to be in a professional, polite tone. And if they don't do that, they get 0 out of 2.
Yeah, so how do you go about doing that when it's not a core assessed part of your program? I think a lot of lecturers just either assume, you know, someone else is going to teach their students how to, you know, you appropriately use tools, or they just ignore it. I mean, I think we really need to be proactive.
Well, we had a visitor from Harvard talking down to us at ANU this week, saying how in America they'd researched and discovered that students needed to learn soft skills like communication. And we looked at him and said, duh, you know, we've made that a core part of the, you know, computing and engineering degrees.
Yep.
And students have to do that, as, you know, there are courses on that with assessment. I think that's the way to do it. You say either it's important and you allocate time in the curriculum to it, or you think it's not important and you don't.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's right. So I know a lot of programs will have a communication component, and it's usually got some form of assessment attached to it. So maybe that's an appropriate, you know, part of the curriculum to use, is anything that's attached to collaboration, communication. Hey, welcome, Mark. Another participant from Australia, and looks like you're on the move somewhere.
On the train.
You're on the train, so we won't ask you too many questions, but thanks for jumping in and joining us. Good to see you. So I presume you're commuting to work.
Yes.
And
Stuck in a problem at the moment.
Yeah, I commute on the train too, so I know what it's like. But thanks for joining us, but I won't ask you any questions because, you know, it's embarrassing talking on the train. Hey, so Neil, I mean, you've contributed to the project bank this week, which is great, and I just really encourage other people to go and look at what Neil's contributed there and give them some feedback. You know, perhaps use it as an example. So that's linked off the CMALT cmooc.wordpress.com site. There's a link there to the project bank, and each week we're encouraging people to share parts of their portfolios if they've done them, just as examples, and just so people can critique them, give them feedback, and also for people who are starting, they can, you know, have some examples to look at. So I guess one of the things I wanted to sort of briefly talk to people about was how they're finding the various tools that we're using for the CMOOC. I mean, we've had to, unfortunately, replace Google Plus because that's, you know, Google's deleting it, removing it. And so we've used our Moodle forum, but really struggling to get some sort of interaction happening there. So wondering what people's thoughts are around, you know, is the Moodle an appropriate tool to use for our discussion forum for the CMOOC, or should we be looking at something else? Do people have any suggestions? Are there any issues around the Moodle forum? Is there something technically not working for people? What do people think?
I don't think it's as intuitive as what we've used in the past. It does take a little while to try and find things. But I think once you find them, you can get on and contribute. But yeah, just initially it's kind of like, well, where do I find these things?
Okay.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think there's, on the Moodle, it seems like there's several different threads that you need to find which is the right thread to make your comment on. And I'm not that familiar with Moodle anyway, so I'm finding it, each time I go, I wonder, oh, which one do I have to join in with, or shall I also add a link to Twitter, or shall I also add a link to the project bank? So there's for me anyway, it's a little confusing as to, I have to perhaps put 2 or 3 different links in, or add different points in. So yeah, it's not so easy for me. If there was just one sort of stream, then I think that would be somewhat easier.
Yeah, I guess partly the reason for the multiple streams is to try to target people who prefer to use different tools. But I guess we've preferenced effectively 3. One's email, one's the Moodle forum itself, and the other is Twitter. And so giving people those 3 different options to choose from. But certainly, I guess I would encourage people to use all 3 ways of amplifying the communication, and not just rely on one. And
I guess
oh, sorry, Tom. Yes.
I was going to say I'm very familiar with Moodle, but I guess I need to be prompted with a question or something to go there to put it in. I find the Twitter very intimidating, because I never know who's reading it. So at least in Moodle, I feel comfortable that it's only the group looking at the stuff.
Okay. So are the announcements coming through?
I get an announcement to remind me there's this synchronous forum. Are there other announcements?
Yeah, so what I normally try to do is probably a couple of times a week actually post on the forum. It should automatically email you saying there's a new post.
Okay, well, I better go in and check what I've got. I might have accidentally switched it off.
Yeah, and what I also try to do, just in case people have either unticked it or have not subscribed properly, I also try to do an announcement, which seems to get through. The announcements seem to be getting through, but not necessarily the forum posts. But I'm just wondering if it's an issue with how we've done our install. I'm not sure. So maybe, Paul, you might have a look at our Moodle install, being the expert, really.
Yeah, I was going to say, when I first was aware you were using Moodle was last week on the video chat. I'm sorry, and I was kind of a little bit pleased, because I kind of I like Moodle as the hub, and I always felt the Google Plus, it kind of never quite made sense to me where the latest stuff was happening.
Yeah, that's the downside of the Google Plus, was it just became this long scrolling, list of stuff, wasn't it?
Yes, and I found that a bit hard to navigate. So I was quite kind of pleased to see Moodle used as the hub. But I have to confess, I don't know. I haven't logged into it yet, and I don't know what my username and password is.
Okay, so I think that's part of an issue as well. It's just getting people to actually log in and check and make sure their email address they've used, they're actually checking. So yeah, if you could do that for us, Paul, and maybe even have a look, give us some feedback on how we could make it work better.
Can you add me as an admin and
sure,
or
yeah,
teacher on that course, rather?
Yep, we'll do that. Cool.
But maybe just some clear guidance or some clear instructions on where to find things, like start here, or add discussion here, or this is where you're going to do da 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 da.
Yeah, I guess I was kind of really keen just to let it grow organically and let people use it, rather than say this is how you must use it. But at the moment, it's predominantly myself.
Yeah.
So
I can't find on the WordPress site, aside from the discussion forum, any instructions of how to get to the Moodle or how to log in, or anything there really.
Okay, so I need to put something more on the WordPress site. It's probably because it was a little bit last minute as a solution, so I probably haven't updated. There's probably still a few references to Google Plus on the WordPress site. But yeah, good point, Paul.
That's right. Yeah, one of the difficulties about Moodle is getting people to it in the first place.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
yeah.
So part of the reason for using Moodle was that the Moodle app is actually, quite reasonable now. So you can use the Moodle app on your device and just log in, and then it remembers your password, and you just got to remember to check it. But we'll have a look at it and see if we can streamline it somewhat and get your expertise in there, Paul.
Okay.
Cool. Hey, anything else that people want to talk about, share, ask?
Can I ask a question about the actual sort of portfolio?
Sure.
When I first started, I thought that the weekly task was the portfolio, but I'm beginning to sort of realise that that's not necessarily the case. It's almost like maybe I'm wrong here, but it seems like a sort of rehearsal for the portfolio, and or just a first try, and then once the 7 weeks are over, then you come back maybe and improve what you've done, and at some point somebody looks at it.
Yeah, so I guess effectively what the CMOOC is a guideline, an outline of what to do for a CMALT portfolio. It's not meant to actually be the development of your portfolio itself. And for some people, it might be the first time they've used any of these tools. So it's just a way of starting to gather some experience of using technology in teaching and learning, reflect on that, think maybe I might like to use some of these tools for my own teaching practice. For other people, they may have been using technology in their practice for many, many years, and it just might be an appropriate time for them to sort of bring that into focus and start thinking how to put it into a portfolio. So yeah, you're right, Neil. I mean, the weekly activities are more focused on trying to create a community, a support structure. It's not really the weekly activities are something to guide you and help you. It's not necessarily exactly what you have to put into your portfolio sections itself. So hopefully that kind of makes sense.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, that makes it very clear. Thank you.
So we're not linked directly to the accreditation process at all. It's really a support community. So once you need to put together your portfolio according to the CMALT guidelines, which we're trying to sort of give people an idea what those are, and then it goes through the formal accreditation process once you've submitted your portfolio to ALT or to Escalite, and then that will get sent out to 2 peer reviewers, and you'll get formal feedback on your portfolio from that. But that's nothing to do with the CMOOC as such. We're just that sort of a support community. But both ALT and Escalite are very keen on what we're doing because there really isn't a support structure around it at all, which I think is part of the issue why there's so few people doing it.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Okay, cool. Any other questions? That was a good one.
I think I'd like to kind of join up with a couple of people if we can to help me, because I'm in a kind of bit of a rut and stuck where I am. So if I can join up with a couple of people and get them to help guide me through, it'd be great.
So the next thing that we're hoping to do is have a boot camp, which is a week of getting people to just try to set some time aside to write their portfolios, get peer critique on them, etc. So look out for that. We'll be advertising that. So you can either do that remotely, obviously, if you're not here in Auckland, but for those at AUT, we'll be getting together physically and getting people to work on their portfolios.
That sounds like a great idea. And you'd like to touch base with you then, Lisa, because we're in those similar roles.
Yeah, I think that would really work, Paul.
Thanks, Paul. That would really help.
I'd encourage you, Neil, to keep working on your portfolio. What you're doing so far, I think, is really good. And, you know, based on what I've read from your portfolio, you've got quite a depth of experience that you can draw on and build into that portfolio.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I certainly intend to carry on. Yeah.
Cool. Hey, well, I think we'll draw it to a close for today. Sorry about the technical issues. I've had to sort of leave my desk and I'm sitting at Lisa's computer, so I couldn't really do any screen sharing or anything, but it was great to have a discussion. So thank you, everyone. Great to have you contributing. Thank you, Tom, from Australia, and Neil all the way from Japan. And of course, Nelson and Lisa next door. So thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Have to go into my office to actually stop the stream, so there'll be a short delay.